must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
It is ridiculous and it is against the laws of nature that we can have somebody sitting pretty who takes home more money than the credible entrepreneur who is doing actual production of goods and services.
We always say it as it is.
It is only in this country that when a thief is arrested, you hear elders from their tribe saying, "He is our son and he is our thief."
If you are deviant
Yes.
and I call you leader,
Yes.
probably you are already a leader, but you are leading in the wrong direction.
We want to see the role of the youth
Yeah.
in the security,
Yes.
governance,
Yes.
and development.
The youth that I meet and work with here, you know, we call them the millennials and X's and Y's, this and that. They don't necessarily want to live like their fathers and grandfathers,
Yes.
do business like their fathers and grandfathers. They're more independent, they're better educated, and they're the ones that are making everything move in this region.
We look at the issues, we talk about issues that impact people's lives in Africa.
The African peoples themselves continue to cheer bad leaders, and because they cheer them on, they continue to be misled.
Let me ask you, Doctor, would you rather be somebody who does not enjoy so much freedom but you are rich?
Yes.
Or you'd rather be poor who you are actually imprisoned by the poverty itself?
My goal is not to come here and say, I want the majority ownership, I want to own this, I want to own that, I want to do this. My goal is we all make money and we're all happy, and I help build a big business here.
Punchline is for Africa, with Africa, from Africa.
Viewers, President Uhuru Kenyatta, the President of the Republic of Kenya, has 37 months left for his term of office to end. We conducted an opinion poll on key tenets of what can be done within the 37 months. We looked at the economy, corruption, judiciary, security, unity of purpose, politics of 22, the referendum, the handshake, reconciliation, the Big Four agenda, dialogue with Somalia, democracy in Kenya, constitutionalism in Kenya, media status in Kenya, what the citizens want, preferred, talked about, international relations of this country, Kenya, and finally we looked at the leadership style of His Excellency the President, what people thought about it, the cabinet, the opinions that came out about the cabinet of the current cabinet of President Uhuru Kenyatta, the opinion about the church in Kenya, what the church is in Kenya, and the opinion about 20 items listed, the debt, the rising debt of the Republic of Kenya, the debt that people have, the debt that the government and the people of Kenya have to pay as a result of the money that they borrowed for infrastructure, reconstruction, manufacturing, the food and the infrastructure. We looked at all these items and we came to a conclusion that in 37 months, there's quite a lot that must change. But there are key factors that stand out within the 37 months of the leadership and the government of President Uhuru Kenyatta. To leave a legacy, the president needs to look at items and narrow down some of the items that can be achievable and those that can be improved and those that can be left for the next government to work on and continue working to stabilize this country called Kenya. The most outstanding items that most people talked about with the highest percentage were judiciary, economy, corruption, unity of purpose, referendum, the handshake, and democracy, plus the church and the debt that was alarming most of the Kenyans. But behind these alarms and behind this scenario, one factor stands out for President Uhuru Kenyatta. He has set the ball rolling in the direction that, yes, a handshake that he took a position to take. It's very rare in Africa for a winner to think of the loser, and the loser to think of the winner, and then the winner also to incorporate in some of the activities, not fully in government, but in terms of handshake. President Uhuru Kenyatta stands out within the 37 months left to cement the question that Kenyans want to look at the judiciary, to look at the referendum, at the constitution. Are there some things in the constitution that need to change? If you look at the fight between the governors and the MCAs, between the governors and the central government, devolution has worked very efficiently. Most people did not want even to say much because they needed the services. But the amount of the corruption in the developed units has worried most Kenyans. So can we, in the next, as Kenyans, can Kenyans look at this and find out and take note what they can help the President of Republic of Kenya to improve on, to achieve within the 37 months. I know it is a hard, a long, tall order. It's a tall order that can bring about difficulties, but it has to be achieved. A legacy must be left, especially on the question of unity of purpose, especially on the question of fighting corruption. At least leave a legacy by fighting corruption, unity, creating a united Kenya, bringing about good social standing of the people of Kenya, and above all, cleaning the judiciary such that it can help Kenyans in resolving the contentious issues. You have done very well on international relations, and international relations need to be encouraged more. But the question of Somalia brings a lot of hiccups. The best way to resolve it lies in your credentials as the President of the Republic of Kenya. The legacy goes on, is in and on track. Thank you, viewers. Fellow Africans, since 1957, when Ghana gained independence, there has been quite a lot of political, social, economic indicators on the African continent that show that Africa has progressed from pre-independence Africa to post-independence Africa.
Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. From now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs.
66 years down the road, Africa finds itself with the first country, Ghana, having gained independence. We find ourselves still locked up, controlled, manipulated, instructed, logistically supplied, equipped by foreign powers that dictate our agenda. Africa is endowed with plenty of minerals, resources, good weather. The climate is so favorable for the growth of food enough to sustain us. But we find ourselves in countries where hunger is killing people. Hunger is killing people because most of the people have taken to arms to fight wars, conflicts. Starvation has taken the place of development. In most African countries like Sudan, South Sudan, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Nigeria, in Biafra, and north of Nigeria there is Boko Haram, Somalia in the Horn of East Africa. We have taken to conflict instead of development. Development was the key indicator. When Kwame Nkrumah made the first speech that seek ye African political unity, economic development will come automatically, he was right. The events happening in Libya today vindicates Nkrumah, vindicates Nyerere, Sekou Toure, and NASA, the founding fathers of our Pan-Africanism. The events happening in Central African Republic, in Congo today, as the war of rebels ranges on between the rebel and the rebels and the government and the rebels, vindicates the founding fathers of this revolution. Our independence, therefore, was only on paper. Our independence, therefore, was only in symbols. Our independence also was in signs. Our independence also was in boundaries. That we received our flags, but we never received full independence as by the word independence. Most of the 3/4 of African countries, French-speaking countries, have their budgets being done in Paris. Is that independence? The Paris government or the French government does its budgets based on how much they will get from African countries. Is that independence? Is this the Africa that you want? Is it the Africa that we must look at? Is it the Africa that we shall leave for the future generation? If the answer to you is yes, then so be it. But if the answer is no, you agree with me that this is not the Africa we want to live for the future generation. Our generations and the future generation need to find a legacy. What is the legacy that Africa and African Union will leave for the future generation? The wars ranging in Libya, in South Sudan, in Khartoum, in Mogadishu, in DRC Congo, in Amazonia, in Cameroon, Boko Haram, Mali, in Mauritania, the uprisings in Algeria, all point to one thing, that yes, we are not yet independent. We are still controlled by external forces. Thank you. Good morning, viewers, wherever you are in Africa and wherever you are in the world, in Europe, wherever you are watching us from. This is Punchline Africa TV, broadcasting all the way from Nairobi, the Republic of Kenya. Thank you very much, viewers, and those watching us from different stations all over with our sister company or sister Broadcasting Corporation, Southern Cameroon Broadcasting Corporation, right from Berlin. Good morning. Good morning, those viewers on the main satellite. You'll be able to see quite a lot of things that we want to talk about this morning. But this morning we shall dedicate the morning show, and then later on in the evening at 8 p.m. we have a very fantastic show that you don't want to miss. Those in Africa. It's a show that will make you understand as to whether we want elections in Africa or not. Does Africa need elections or it needs concessions? That is the question for tonight in The Punch, one of our shows, The Punch. We shall be discussing together with some academics whether Africa needs elections. Time and time again, we see what happens in Africa when elections are conducted. But this morning, let's look at the legacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta, the peaceful coexistence, background of what he wants a Kenya, what Kenya he wants to live for back. What Kenya will he leave behind when he leaves the legacy. When he talks about a legacy, what type of Kenya are we going to see? A divided Kenya? No. A united Kenya? Yes. A Kenya without tribal boundaries. A Kenya without ethnicity. A Kenya without problems of health care. A Kenya that gives hope. A Kenya that brings about the real change that is needed by the people for the people. It is very, very important that when you are looking at this country called Kenya, you must look at the diversity. During elections, that the diversity goes away. During campaigns, the diversity goes away. When you talk about Kenya, when you want to say this is my Kenya, it disappears when we approach elections. It disappears when we have finished elections. People don't care about the country after elections and before elections. When you declare that you are going to have elections, several people start changing positions on what should be done. The talk becomes a senseless talk. A talk that dismembers a nation instead of giving a nation hope. This is the Kenya that we want. the coexistence of Kenyans that Africa wants. President Uhuru Kenyatta legacy seeks to peaceful coexistence. A peaceful coexistence in the sense that all tribes, all people will actually come and listen to a unified format, a voice that comes from a united country. Look at the countries that are united in Africa. Tanzania, for example, speaks with a voice. 7 of the people in Tanzania speak with one voice. Countries with conflicts. Nigeria, for example, Boko Haram, the Igbo people, Biafra. In Amazonia, it is a problem of ethnicity and a tribal enclave and the refusal by the leadership to preach peaceful coexistence. That has led to divisions that we see in Nigeria, the divisions we see in South Sudan between the Dinka and the Nuers, and the divisions we see in Ethiopia, which threatens the security of Ethiopian people. It is this that we are looking at. What legacy will President Uhuru Kenyatta leave behind? We are looking at a perception. We want to create a perception, a good, change the image of a Kenya that fights every elections, the image of a Kenya that goes at war when elections are declared, is what President Uhuru Kenyatta wants to abolish, to remove completely, and put it in a dustbin of history, that once there was a time, a nation that was divided has become a nation united. Viewers, it is very important when discussing matters of this magnitude, because when you say you are trying to fight tribalism, you must be firm that you will be fought by those who want to thrive over tribal enclaves. It is true that in most Africa, especially in Kenya today, tribal enclaves create difficulties for unity of a nation. This unity of a nation is paramount to development. If you don't have a unity, you don't work together, you don't speak together, we don't speak the same language, we marginalize people because of their tribes, then we cannot have development at all. Development comes in a situation where things are so good and things are actually up to standard. But here we are. That's what we are. That's what we believe in. That's what we talk about, unity, lip service. But there is no unity. When it comes to elections, people want to kill each other. Look at what happens in Africa. Most countries whose leaders have refused to preach unity have ended up killing themselves. People have gone, people have died, people have left enormous destruction behind, and that is what we call leadership, which is a bad leadership. President Uhuru Kenyatta coexistence policy of peace, creating peace through coexistence, is what Africa wants, is what everybody wants, is what people are talking about. Thank you very much. Let's turn to the newspapers as we bring the main core topics of coexistence. Can you achieve coexistence? Can you achieve the format? Can you push unity? If you have corruption, if you have a bad judiciary, if you have bad citizens, the mindsets of our African citizens also plays a crucial role in the unity of a nation. Are we mindful of our national values? Where are the national values? We have no national values. Some people have lost national values. Look at the national anthem. How many children in our schools can sing our national anthem? Even the first stanza alone. How many? We have a problem here. So those are the things that I want to look at. Thank you very much. Let's take a break and then come back to look at the aspects that have become obstacles to the legacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta. Don't go away. Keep watching. Thank you very much. Welcome back to Punchline Africa TV. The show is Good Morning Show from Africa, for Africa, and with Africa. Thank you very much. This show shows to you, comes to you, the courtesy of the building of bridges. The bridges, we talk about the bridges today. We don't know what will come out of the bridges. But we have to build a foundation for the bridges to be on. Today's newspaper, we shall look at the Daily Nation. The Daily Nation of Kenya in the morning, those watching from abroad, it talks about win for teachers as medical cover is enhanced. That's very good news. one of the best news that has come from Teachers Service Commission. On the front page of the Daily Nation, you find the lady in charge of Kereche in trouble. One of the employers in the Rift Valley, in Naivasha, she is in trouble, and she's planning to contest any of the claims. The front page says the handshake team expected to produce a bill. Uhuru and Raila plan to rally support for BBI draft, seeking to fulfill their promises of enhancing a peaceful coexistence. I did not know. I was telling you coexistence, a peaceful coexistence of the people of Kenya. That's it. There is nothing much. You can be poor. You can have no food. You can have poverty. You can have ignorance. But if you are united, I don't think very many people in Tanzania bother whether governments are changing or elections are coming. You can call an election in Tanzania at any time, and Tanzanians will come and vote and go home. They don't fight neighbors. They don't kill others. They don't spew hate. Warmongering, hate mongers. No, a coexistence peacefully. That is when we shall have the true legacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta. In the Daily Nation on page 3, we have all systems go for census amid fears. I don't know of what. I don't see any fears. There is nothing to fear. Counting is everywhere. Those who want to be must be counted. A nation must know how many people they have, what type of services are supposed to be there. That is the Daily Nation. All systems ready. On Saturday, stay home. No bar will be open, and we have nobody. So if you are used to having a problem of not drinking, or watching football, please prepare your television in your house and wait to be counted. As I said, one of the things, the stories on top of the lips of every Kenyan is how Linturi and the wife are spewing their private things in public. One of the things that a human being would like to run away from is the question of discussing things when you have children who are grown up. Then how will you now bring these children up when you have children and you are discussing how you stayed in a hotel, how long you were in that hotel? It is sad. It's a sad episode which should not happen. The Standard newspaper has good news and bad news. Again, what is on top of the Standard newspaper talks about the same affair I've just talked about, but Kenyans return 25 billion hidden in mattresses of old notes to the banks. This is very encouraging news, but there's still more money out there. You still have time to change the money. When time elapses, it will be a sorry state for you, but you still have time to change the money as of now. Another count me in is called census, the handshake. On page 5 of it says the handshake has derailed war on corruption. The Senator Mutula has said it. I don't know how, but I don't think so. I think it has made things possible for people to be picked from all sides, and nobody is coming out to say you have targeted a political party, my members, it is possible that it has worked. Another headline, or let us prepare youths for a gig economy. That's very good. But if that is what it is, let the people also involve many people. Involve as many people as possible. The Star newspaper, still headline, we can see from here, it is still the issue of Linturi and the wife. I think the cartoon here has summarized it. Very well balanced, all this, balance this, Kaitani. Hey, okay. This cartoon is very interesting, and I have no comments about it in the Star newspaper. How I love it, million on Linturi. Million to do what? What was it? What were millions coming from? Previously, we saw this lady said she had no money. Now she says she had millions. It is something that could create a revival of her case or cases of corruption that led her to losing her job in the Deputy President's office. Viewers, thank you very much for listening to the news. Let's come back to the final part. And the final part of it is the question of obstacles, corruption, bureaucracy, structural challenges are in to frustrate the legacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta. For those who might be very interested, might see that every time you fight corruption, there is a backlash from certain community. And then people say you are targeting our people. That frustrates the legacy. And I hope the earlier we get rid of all this, the better for this country. Therefore, the legacy still goes on. It is on course. There are so many other successes that have come out of the legacy. For example, the peace, the coexistence that we see today. That is all the legacy. It will be marked in the history books that there was a legacy that existed. The truce between Raila and government. Such truce has seen some results, a direction where Kenyans. But the cardinal thing on all this, which I need to advise Kenyans, is you need an electoral system that can be clean, clear, precise, to deliver a mechanism that has everybody on board. That's the only problem that Kenya has. The biggest problem of Kenya stems from elections. There's no other problem. During non-election years, Kenyans drink together, eat together, fight together, condemn terrorist attacks together, go to church together. But when it comes to election time, we have a lot of differences. Thank you very much, viewers. That is the much we can say today. We shall be here again at 8 p.m. live from Mombasa, where we shall be broadcasting together with our correspondents the question on the Punch. Our show, The Punch, today, it is called The Punch. I don't know whether the production can show it here. Can show that clip there for people this evening at 8 p.m. The Punch. Does Africa need elections or it needs consensus? That is the question. Does Africa need elections or it needs consensus? We shall be with several academics, this evening right from Harare and Mombasa to see why elections in Africa become a stumbling block to even agenda number 4, the big 4, because people think about elections.
We discuss Africa. We see what ails Africa. And today, this afternoon, we want to see whether Sudan will permanently remain a sick child of Africa. Is it a permanent sickness? Can we resolve the issues of Southern Sudan? Is it something that has gone wrong for 200 years? There has always been a problem in Southern Sudan, in that great region starting
1978. The announcement that came on radio, on TV, I was in my country by then. And I remember I just sat under a tree and I had Mambo Mbotera announcing that President Jomo Kenyatta, the late, had died. It was everybody, it looked like we came to say, oh my God, what has happened? The pictures, it is like the pictures of Tom Mboya. In 1969, some of us were full grown-ups. We saw the assassination of Tom Mboya on the Daily Nation. Those days was a credible newspaper. And in Uganda, it was called the Uganda Argus. The Argus came up with a picture of a slain body that was gunned down up in the town of Nairobi, up in Nairobi in the central CBD district. We were shocked. So today marks a great day of the founding father passed away in Kenya, and we pray and continue to cherish in his wisdom to steer Kenya into a country that looks at values. What are the values of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta? What did Mzee Jomo Kenyatta say? What did he tell us as Africans? What Pan-African values do we share with him? These are the questions that every African should be asking himself today. How many of you still remember what Mzee Kenyatta used to talk about in a struggle against colonialism that had actually come to plant itself here permanently? How many of us still remember those values? How many of us still talk about them? How many of us teach our children to be resilient, to be patriotic? That is what we should be doing and be talking about today. I wish the family of His Excellency the President and other family members and himself and the rest of those a good day, a memory, a remembrance of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. May his soul walk over Kenya, create a peaceful coexistence of a nation called Kenya. Thank you very much, and God bless you. See you again at 8 p.m. East African Standard Time, live from Mombasa and Harare. Our correspondents and academics will be in charge today. And thank you very much. We thank all of you for what you have done, the tenacity and the steadfastness that you have shown in watching us as Punchline Africa TV.
From all the way, the Alimadi wars and the rest of all what happened until today, peace seems to be elusive. Why has UN taken slow action? Why hasn't UN set up a tribunal We want to see a tribunal that will make sure that Southern Sudan people are accountable. Those who committed crimes against the human beings. 20,000 Sudanese perished. They are perished. They are not accountable. Nobody can account for them. And we cannot sit here, go on hammering peace agreements without mechanisms of accountability. If we set a tribunal for Sierra Leone, for Rwanda, for Camera Rouge, we need somebody to stand up for the poor masses, the masses that have died, the masses that continue to die, the masses that are being brutalized, murdered, maimed on a daily basis by marauding armies of both Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. There must be an accountability. You are not going to sit here and tell people there is no accountability in Southern Sudan. There must be a tribunal. Why do we run to harass countries of Kenya, put ICC on Kenya, put ICC on this country, put ICC on Central African Republic? Why have we delayed on putting a tribunal for Southern Sudan to find out who is killing, who has been killing, how they have been killing people? Let me speak for the people in Southern Sudan, the women, the children who have not gone to school, the children who have no medicine, the children who have nothing, who have been running since 2013, and the war cannot end because of two people. Let them face the tribunal. I'm not going to keep quiet as a Pan-African to see Southern Sudan being maimed, being tortured, being cut, dismembered, and we keep quiet and watch people got images of people, of malcontents singing to us in Uganda, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in South Africa, telling us they have money. Let them face the international tribunal and tell the tribunal who gave them the guns, where they buying them, how they were killing people. Enough of is enough. Enough is enough for Africa. We have had enough. There is no need of that anymore. Enough is enough. And if people have died, they will not cry. We people who are left on planet Earth must cry for them. We must find justice for them. We must make sure that their leaders who go on bragging on television stations all over the world who are accountable. They must be behind bars.
Nyerere was right. If you are a true leader, you are not successful unless your successor succeeds. And this is the message that we must send to all African leaders. The other thing that we must tell our leaders, and we who are leaders wherever we are, is that leadership is a relay marathon race, and that leadership is intergenerational. You are not a leader unless you have grown leaders, and you are not a leader unless you are a servant. Jesus of Nazareth was right. He amongst you who wants to lead, he must be a servant. Our Africans of old were right that our chiefs were not rulers over us, but custodians. So, my friend Masiza, you have brought us to a good thing. For those of you who are present in this assembly, examine a subject that is very topical, the integration of Africa. In the last few years, many Africans resident in the continent and those in the diaspora have been grappling with the question of African unity, or as some would prefer to refer to it, the integration of Africa as one of the avenues that would place us on the path as a continent of economic prosperity, social cohesion, and political stability. Today, we want to examine whether the idea of unity and or integration is feasible. And this must be seen in the context of the fact that the colonial project, which was hatched in Berlin in 1884, was underpinned by the pernicious philosophy which proceeded on the premise that Africans had to be divided and conquered. And that is how Africa then became a sphere of influence, partitioned as it was, amongst the European powers of the day. The Germans, the British, the French, the Spaniards, the Portuguese, all had their spheres of influence. And we will remember so very fondly in 1963, in the month of May, Kwame Nkrumah, speaking to 32 heads of state of the then independent African countries, emotionally and passionately exhorted his compatriots that Africa had to unite, because if she did not unite, then the erstwhile colonial masters would return through a neo-colonial project. The question is, was Nkrumah right? And if he was right, what can we do in this day and age? David, the history is known, the desire is there. There is no shortage of initiatives in Africa today of those who are saying that the only way is unity. What is your take?
Thank you very much, Professor P.L. Olumumba, for inviting me to this show. And before I do that, I want also to thank the viewers for waiting for Professor P.L. Olumumba for a long time. For the last 2 weeks, he has been busy up and down out across the globe. Yes, to go straight to the question. Can Africa and can African countries integrate? The question is a big no and a yes. Very big no and a very small yes. Because even the smallest there where we are, we have not we can't even hold the pact together. Obstacles are too many. African countries cannot integrate when each and every African country has a Ministry of Defense. What is it to defend from what? The colonial master whom Nkrumah talked about went a long time ago. They left us. Is there any external occupation coming? No. The GDP of the African countries, most of them go to defense.
Defense, yes.
To defend from what? If you want to integrate, let's be very honest. If you want to integrate, why do you defend? For example, Uganda has an army, over 4 million soldiers. Kenya has an army. Tanzania has an army. Rwanda has an army. Sudan does not have an army, because I don't call it an army. I call men who just wear clothes and walk, because they don't respect the rule of law and the human rights. Now, if you are talking of integration, how will these people integrate when we cannot even have one communication, proper communication between the two countries? A small conflict is, we use a lot of force. Take, for example, the question of Pan-African trade or intra-continental trade, trade-free pact. All African countries know very well that if they had to unite to trade, we would be very, very powerful continent. But only 23 of them signed on the first day. The rest said we are coming back.
But David, perhaps let us begin from the beginning,
yes.
Even though we have started. There are those who are listening to us and are saying Perhaps we ourselves are confused about terms. We are talking about integration.
Yes.
When we talk about integration,
Yeah.
are we saying the same thing that Kwame Nkrumah said in 1963? Are we saying the same thing that Julius Kambarage Nyerere was talking about? Are we saying the same thing that Ahmed Sékou Touré was talking about, or Modibo Keïta was talking about? Are we talking about integration? And what do we mean when we talk about integration?
Integration is coming together politically. Nkrumah was on a political unity. He wanted all African countries to be under one globe, one continental body, the Organization of African Unity. Speak with one voice.
The United States of Africa.
Of Africa, of which Gaddafi had. Nkrumah's vision is Gaddafi, the late Gaddafi's vision. But later on, other leaders who came in as military coups took place. Some leaders like President Museveni came in with another version of integration.
But perhaps we are running ahead of ourselves. Remember,
Yes.
in 1963, when Kwame Nkrumah said, and this is what he said in Addis Ababa, let us not live here without a single army with a united command. Let us not live here without a single foreign policy. Let us not live here without an avenue towards a single currency. Let us not live here without identifying the capital of that united Africa. His sense of urgency was that we needed to have something in the nature of the United States of America, and that we would then be a single country with a federal structure. There was another group, and that group's view was articulated by Julius Kambarage Nyerere. Nyerere took the view that while I agree with Kwame that we should move towards integration, we should do it through regional blocks. We should start with the southern, the eastern, and the west. Of course, you remember in 1994, Nyerere did say, Nkrumah was right, I was wrong. We should have had the Big Bang approach.
Yes.
The question that is now legitimate and urgent and contemporary is, everybody talks about this Pan-African project.
Yes.
And there are those who take the view that now that we have the regions, we have SADC, we have ECOWAS, we have East African Community, we have Central Africa, and we have the Maghreb. These are possibly the building blocks that we can use for the purpose of building this Africa that the Nkrumahs and the Sékou Tourés and the Modibo Keitas were talking about, and that we are now talking about. What is your take on that?
My take, I agree with Nyerere. I would agree with the late Nyerere that building small blocks would lead to a larger integration. I also agree with President Museveni on that one. Because if you want an African integration, the United States of Africa is impossible. It can't happen.
Are you saying that is impossible, or you are saying that it can be achieved but through a gradual process?
Yes, gradual process, but you know, even that gradual process, Professor, is impossible. I can give reasons why it is impossible.
Tell us.
Tell me, ECOWAS cannot lend IGAD troops. IGAD cannot lend ECOWAS troops. If there is a war in West Africa, show me one East African state that has participated in, apart from Kenya, which went to Liberia, on United Nations, not on ECOWAS invitation. So that unity, even if you say it is gradually, because I told you at the beginning of my statement, I said a big no and a small yes. And I'm stuck there. I will show you why it is very difficult for that unity to come. Because within the smaller blocks, we cannot see eye to eye. But there are some countries, Prof, which cannot see eye to
David,
eye.
I want you to make that statement a little later.
Okay.
What I want us to wrap our minds around is there justification for African integration as question number one? Is it an ideal that we should aspire?
Of course. That's it. Yeah, that's okay.
Number two,
yes.
If it is, what are the reasons that should give justification to African unity?
Yes. The reason is, the reason is that one of the reasons why African unity is needed is to foster trade. That's it. Importantly, economic, barriers. Once economic barriers are gone, there is going to be all the time the best things for Africa. That's one. Another one is once we unite as an African body without anybody interfering, we shall secure the continent in terms of security, in terms of safeguarding the entire borders of Africa. And number three, there will be quite a lot of cultural, what can I say, a culture, I can call it a culture, a revolution. A very big cultural revolution. For example, if we say we are uniting and we adopt Swahili as a language to keep us as a Pan-Africans, or we take Arabic, or we take Hausa, or we take whatever language we shall come up with.
But David, those who are listening to us may dismiss us. They say these are armchair analysts and armchair theorists.
And that's why I've told you
and therefore what they are saying is wishful thinking, and that it will never be achieved. It is a pie in the sky, and they're just they are not talking things that are achievable. How do we respond to people who may very wish to dismiss us as
they can't dismiss us because these are facts, Prof.
Yes.
These are facts. It is very difficult. Your question was, Africa can unite. If they united, we could have advantages.
Correct.
That I've told you, yes. One of the advantages would be we would have the biggest trading bloc.
Right now, if
we can have goods from East Africa being sold in West Africa, West Africa selling goods in South Africa, East Africa, if we were united. But this is a dream that might not come now.
I want you
it
to
will
go
be very
on
difficult.
slowly.
Yes.
Even without unity and integration, we can have intra-African trade. But many out there, and the different forums that you and me belong to, are saying that what we are aspiring to achieve is to dissolve the so-called the boundaries, which we think are artificial, to eliminate these visa requirements, to ensure that we have a single currency, to ensure that we have a lingua franca, to ensure that we exploit our resources and possibly move towards having one army. These are the things that people are talking about, a single government, and each of these countries that we now say are sovereign would merely be components of a larger country, and they would be components as a federal units.
Yes.
The question is, assuming that this is achievable, what are the headwinds? Remember, and this is something that we don't often talk about as much as we should, that the former colonies of the United Kingdom have grouped themselves under the Commonwealth.
Yes.
And there is a sense in which the Commonwealth has an interest and even control in terms of certain things that happen in those countries, with the titular head being the British monarch. The French also have a grouping of their own former colonies. The Portuguese also has groupings of their former colonies, so that African leaders may meet as they do in Addis Ababa, but there are occasions when they meet as French-speaking West African countries, as English-speaking African countries, as Portuguese countries. Are these some of the things that stand in the way of African unity, that Africa is still divided and ruled albeit surreptitiously?
Yes, correct, 100%. Those organizations stand as roadblock. Because immediately you talk about African Union, look at how the way we behave at the African Union.
How do we behave?
We behave very badly. And I wouldn't like to go into that subject because we have a guest in the country today. The president of France is here as our guest.
You can wear velvet gloves.
Yes, I will put on gloves today. But I would like to tell the truth that as soon as African Union sounds nearer thee, that song, nearer thee, that nearer, as soon as we're about to come there, some external forces will break us off.
But
and wait first, Prof.
Okay, David.
Some external forces will break us up. You have mentioned Commonwealth. You have mentioned the Francophone, the Portuguese, the Spaniards, the Arab League. For example, Egypt does not believe it is in Africa. We are the only ones following Egypt to bring Assisi to be our chairperson. But Egypt is not in Africa. Egypt fights more a war in the Middle East than it helps us to fight a war in South Sudan, to stop a war in South Sudan. Egypt sends troops, peacekeeping troops, in the East, in the Asian countries, in the Persian Gulf, than bringing the troops down in Africa. Therefore, that one is not in Africa.
No, but David, just before you continue.
Yeah, because I'm bringing you to the attention.
I hear you.
You see where I'm going, because you touched three things.
Yeah, but
the Commonwealth
geopolitical reality.
Yes.
May demand of a country that they participate in activities in their immediate neighborhood, that may not necessarily militate against their presence in a larger union.
But if even in the football, let me take you to the cheapest thing called football.
Take me there.
Yes, let me take you to Tunisia or Algeria or Egypt, which they have been going to the world football. The only country south of Sahara that has gone there, managed to go there, is South Africa and Cameroon.
Nigeria has been there too, but they do.
Wait! I want to show you that the countries in the north are more aligned to the Mediterranean Treaty of Italy and France than they are aligned deeper down in integration of Africa at the Addis Ababa. And before I lose 1 point, Prof, the only thing that Kwame Nkrumah left, which is still uniting us, is Addis Ababa, the capital. We still go there because we respect Nkrumah's word that we live here with one capital. But we have not left with one foreign policy, no United Africa. Gaddafi tried. Before Gaddafi died, I sat with Gaddafi in Sheraton Hotel in Addis Ababa, in the gardens. He told me, my younger man, I have tried this thing, I don't know whether I will get it. He was so much interested in uniting people. Even he did not want the leadership to lead Africa, but he wanted people united. And you saw the catastrophe that befell Gaddafi. So, in essence, the people who might criticize you and me, that we are armchair people talking about the theories, they are right. They are right. Because it will take long before we realize the dream. And the dream of a Pan-African, a united Africa can only come if we eliminate tribalism in our own countries. You know how can you talk about uniting when tribes in your own country, Biafra and the Fulani, the Igbo and the Fulani are hammering each other. The Amazonian people, the other one of Amazonia versus the other Cameroon, are hammering at each other. The Dinka and the Nuer are hammering at each other. Now you are talking of integration.
Burundi does not see eye to eye with Rwanda. It has amassed troops. You touched my center point.
No.
I am now going to go. I want to bring you to the.
I want to stop you there,
okay.
So that we track back.
Yes.
You see, you've given examples of conflict. Conflict is a part of human life, so that even if you have a United States of Africa, we'll still have conflicts. But Nyerere said one thing. You remember in the early days of the East African community, and Nyerere at that time even proposed that the independence of Tanzania be delayed, so that Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya would become independent as one political unit. And his argument was very sound. He said that these ethnic animosities that we find in different countries only make sense in the smaller units. If you become a unit which is larger, then the emphasis on your Luo-ness or Kikuyu-ness or Baganda-ness or Hutu-ness or Tutsi or Chaga or Sukuma become irrelevant because you are part of a large whole thing. And he said that part of the problem that you have, and he said this specifically, that it is bankrupt politicians with no agenda who manipulate ethnic affiliation as a tool in the political marketplace. And his argument, therefore, which is the one I want you to respond to, is that we will be safer if we have these larger units. And I want to take you back where you started, where you argued that we are now confronted with a situation where the Nkrumah dream of African unity was not achieved in the manner that he desired.
Yes.
But that we have a reality, and that reality is that Africa is now organized around regional bodies with SADC, with ECOWAS, and ECOWAS is moving towards a single currency. East African Community is moving towards a single currency. We have a number of countries eliminating the visa, Kenya eliminating visa, South Africa reforming its visa regulations, Ethiopia doing the same, Ghana doing the same. Are we not moving towards that kind of integration, albeit gradually? And I want to agree with you that it will not be immediate. It may not be even during our lifetimes, but we can see baby steps in that direction.
Prof, no.
Why no?
No. I will tell you why. You can't tell me you are going towards that step when you reach a country like, there are countries in SADC, for example, that don't agree that the elections in Zimbabwe was free and fair. There are countries in East Africa today that don't agree. And let's be specific, Burundi does not agree that there should be a full border free open for all Tanzanians, Kenyans, Ugandans to go there. In West Africa, there are countries that don't agree. They don't see eye to eye. And elsewhere. So, this unity is not going to come. I give you another example. Mission or Vision 2063. One of them was to bring us a passport, an African passport, where PLO Lumumba would have an African passport. You wave it anywhere. Wave Burkina Faso, you don't. Where has it gone? They said by 2019, the third generation citizens, that is after you have given the president, the ministers, foreign affairs, then the local civils, then us, we would be getting this. It's gone.
No, is it gone or is it delayed?
It is. Why is it delayed?
No, and this is
okay.
Where
Let's not go that way.
No.
We cannot meet on a common thing. There is nothing in AU in Africa that we can meet, Professor, on a common thing and leave African Union without 2 countries or 3 countries. I heard you in one of your speeches saying maybe count even Morocco Because I follow you.
Yes.
And you said, well, I don't know whether Morocco is also in.
Yes.
Because Morocco withdrew from Africa for 32 years. Morocco has now bounced back. And what Africa is doing today, what the AU is doing is Morocco's agenda. That's it. We don't have AU, we have a Morocco agenda.
No. I want you to be a little slow here, and I want us to be a little methodical so that our audience can follow.
You take me to the route because I told you, you opened me.
You
opened me, unless you guide me, I'm going to be very tough.
I hear you saying a number of things.
There is one thing that is also killing me.
Yes.
How do you talk of African integration when a Kenyan would like to go to South Africa? A Kenyan is subjected to carrying documents as big as this box. A box like this, to show a clerical officer, this is it, this is it, this is it, this is it. And you have your money. You are going to spend it in Johannesburg, improve the economy of South Africa. For 4 days, the workers there in the hotel will enjoy, will do everything.
David,
why is it,
you.
How can we integrate? Because the question here, Professor, is can Africa integrate? The me I've told you is a big no and a very small yes.
I now want us to get into two English words,
yes,
which is very unfortunate. Can Africa integrate? And should Africa integrate? I think
it should integrate.
Should integrate.
Yes.
The second generation question is, can it integrate?
Impossible.
And you started by saying that is a tall order. You are now saying it is impossible. But all of us who are talking about the Pan-African project come from the premise that we have recognized a number of things that are an Africa which is not united is a weak Africa. An Africa that still refers to herself, depending on who colonized them, as Lusophone, as Francophone, as Anglophone, and an Africa that still looks to the capitals of the erstwhile colonizer for direction, a DRC that looks to Brussels, an Equatorial Guinea that looks to Madrid is not desirable. And we are saying that many Africans, both resident in the continent and in their diaspora, say that going forward, our safety and security lies in our unity for a number of reasons. Number one, to silence the guns, as we have promised ourselves in the year 2020, to increase and enhance intra-African trade, and then to have a voice. This is a continent of 1.2 billion plus, with 55 countries, 54 if you exclude Amazonia, but 55 if you do. And we are so
we can't
weak.
Exclude Amazonia.
Of course we can.
No, we have to add it all.
Of course, that is why we say we are 55 countries. And we are saying that this continent with so many people does not even have a permanent presence in the United Nations Security Council. All African countries can vote, but it doesn't matter. One veto bearing power in the United Nations will neutralize all these votes. But what I hear you to be saying, which is rather unfortunate, and you'll correct me if you don't agree with me, is that this project that some of us are so passionate about is an impossibility. And you are telling us, you forget it. You do your things. Your little Kenya survivors, little Kenya, little Rwanda, little Equatorial Guinea, forget about the Pan-African project. No. Is that what I hear you to be saying?
No.
What are you saying?
I might have gone too fast, and you've missed my point.
Let me get your point.
My point is, can Africa integrate? And should Africa integrate? Can Africa integrate? Yes, at a gradual but longer journey.
Yes.
Should Africa integrate? Again, the answer is yes, it should. But conditions that are there that have caused this unity. Professor, I'm looking at the condition. What is it that has caused this unity here? That's all we want to look at. Why, since Nkrumah said it in 63, we are still at the same thing. We have only managed to achieve one thing, the headquarters of African unity. The rest, each one goes with his own foreign policy.
But
now,
David, let's be slow about this.
Every time when I come, every time when I come to tell you to hit my point, you tell me that I am bringing you to a journey. Give me a chance.
I'll give you a chance, okay, but answer it together with this. You know, when you talk about integration, it's not an easy thing. Even if you look at the history of the United States of America, which is now over 200 years old, it started with the 13 original states.
Yes.
Then gradually it gobbled the others, the Louisiana, the new Mexicos, and even if you look at the very loose European Union, in which we are already seeing the Britons want to get out.
Today,
that started as a steel and iron union in 1950s.
Yes.
Are we not judging ourselves too harshly?
No.
Knowing as we do, number one, that we only regained, many countries regained their independence on average just about 50 years ago, and knowing as we do that even as we try to integrate, there are foreign powers that are trying everything to ensure that we don't integrate, and don't forget the new kid on the block, China, with money.
You are now taking me that route, but let me finish. Let me bring you on this route.
Yes.
Africans are more united in the Commonwealth. If you call an African head of state to go for the Commonwealth meeting, he will even leave, even if there is an earthquake here or a landslide, he will enter the plane very fast. Am I wrong?
Why?
Why?
Tell me.
There is something in the Commonwealth.
What is that thing?
Ebesha. There is money in the Commonwealth. Commonwealth delivers. It has programs. You tell me where are the programs of AU? Where are they? Where? Where is the AU program here in your village in Rwendo, Buganda, Guru? Where is the AU program? Where they teach people? Where they teach Pan-Africanism? Where is it? Zero. Tell an African there is a Francophone meeting. President, any of the presidents of Francophone, they will in fact hire the best plane, that there should be no hiccup for him to arrive there much earlier with perfume and a seat. You wanted me to come. I am also, yes, let me tell you, we are more united in the Commonwealth than we are in the AU, and that's a point. Because the Commonwealth has rules. The Commonwealth says no human rights abuse. You don't abuse human rights. You don't kill human beings and stay in the Commonwealth. In the African Union, we kill people and come to Addis Ababa. We kill people and assemble in Addis Ababa, Professor. And sit in Addis Ababa as if we have not killed people. In the Commonwealth, you can't kill people and go and sit with the Queen.
But you see...
No, wait. Okay. Do you agree or not?
No, I will not.
Do you agree that most of the heads of states who fly into Addis Ababa are killers? Most of them. I'm sorry. Can I name them? You want me to say it? Do you want me to say it today so that you understand that I am Pan-African? I want a Pan-African vision. I want Pan-Africa. But you cannot leave your country bleeding and you fly into Addis Ababa, pretend to be a head of state when your country is bleeding. As we speak now, several countries in Africa are bleeding. Central African Republic is bleeding. Sudan, South Sudan is bleeding. Amazonia, Cameroon is bleeding. Biafra, the river state is bleeding. I am now telling you, look at that. Somalia is bleeding. Look at that. Look at Sudan, Khartoum is bleeding. You tell me there is nobody who can allow you to sit in the Commonwealth, Professor Lumumba, once you have tortured the people at your home. There is nobody who is going to allow you in the Francophone headquarters and you come smiling.
But there
are rules. I am trying to bring you to a point which you are not seeing.
No, I am seeing the point.
I'm telling you.
Yes.
Let's adopt Kagame style. of recommendations. Let African Union be accountable. Let it have the teeth to bite. If a leader has massacred the people, if a leader has massacred its people, he should not step in African Union. We should change the charter, completely change the charter of 1963 of the AU to make it workable, that it observes human rights on this continent. Then we can have an integration.
But lest we be accused by our audience of not being abreast with the development. The 1963 OAU Charter has known amendments to the OAU document, and you know the recommendation that have been given by the Kagame Commission. But I hear you to be saying a number of things. One of which is that part of the problem that we have under the African Union is that there appears to be no restraining rules. But I think that the integration program is above and beyond the African Union, so that the African Union only becomes a subject of our discussion because as it is the existing continental body. But is it possible that the push for African integration can come from Africans themselves, and the AU finds itself swallowed and dissolved in that agenda?
Exactly. Now you are talking.
Yes.
It can come from Africans themselves. Which one?
You and me.
You and me.
Yes.
Okay.
And others who think like us.
Let me tell you, Professor, why you and me, we are one of the few outspoken men on this continent. Yourself. You have addressed conferences all over, everywhere. I love you. I love your speeches. I love everything. Do you know that the more you go on addressing these conferences, the more hatred you gain from some African despots who would like to stop you? In fact, if they had a chance.
Don't give them ideas.
I am not giving. I'm telling the truth. The more you address nicely and enlighten people and give them the shining star that was seen when Jesus was going to be born, that shining star, the more some of the despots would like to finish PLO Lumumba. So when you say we African, Matsanga and the PLO Lumumba,
no, but there are many.
We are very few. No. One, we don't have resources. I want to tell you why.
Perhaps, yeah.
We don't have resources. The men who don't want Africa united are the ones who have resources, who have stolen. They are the most corrupt on this continent. Look at Buhari. Can you match Buhari's money? Buhari can call a conference, and the PLO can call a conference. People will first look at Buhari's conference because there is food to eat, and then come to yours to see whether there is food. If there is nothing, they go back to Buhari's house and sit to listen to Buhari. Because you don't have the capital, you don't have the means to organize Africa, to change. So until we start from small units in our own countries, and the PLO, this is something that you must advocate as a Kenyan, that you would start by advising, teaching people patriotism. What is it that you are talking? Some people don't know what Lumumba, who is Nkrumah. You go to people here, university students say, who is Nkrumah? People don't know. So we need to do quite a lot of things other than making statements, roadside announcements that there will be a passport in January. Where is it? Where is it? I've gone to AU several times asking for my passport.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are asking ourselves the question that is now topical. Should Africa integrate, and can it integrate? There are many people out there, some of you who have been grappling with this issue over a long period, spread across the world, and we are grappling with this question because we recognize that Africa remains weak and African nations remain weak because we are divided, and the Berlin spirit of divide and rule is still alive and well, and we are trying to bring on the table the question as to whether we can integrate. The question as to whether we should is one that is settled. The question is, can we? What are the impediments to this integration? What must we do? And the question on the table is, should we now use the existing building blocks for purposes of moving closer? And we are warning ourselves that this is not going to be an immediate project. It is not going to be easy. There are many headwinds. And the question is, what can we do going forward to ensure that this goal is achieved? And we believe it is achievable. David?
Yes, it's achievable. It's a long one. Just as Napoleon in 1789 decided that the old order has to go. Introduce the order of equality, fraternity, and the order of equality, fraternity, and liberty.
Let us be on.
We need until we bring that in, until we bring that order in Africa. Prof, we are just having a mirage. There is no order here. How can you unite with a country? For example, let me give you. Kenya does 2-term office. A president has got to go 2 terms. Kwisha, finished. Tanzania does 2 terms. 1 year, 5 years, 5 years. Kikwete is still flying with me in business class whenever we meet. Oh, you are going to London. I want to have a drink, tea with you before you go out of the airport. Kikwete. I am now being frank because you touched me. And I told you, don't touch me because I will come for you.
No, don't come for me. Come for the subject.
Look here. You can't unite Africa when in other African countries there is bad governance. There is human rights abuse. There is poverty. There is plenty of small arms heaped as if you are defending a nuclear zone. We don't have a country in Africa which has a nuclear weapon. Not yet. Maybe South Africa has tried. We can't unite when there are people in Africa, when the democracy is not the same, when you have someone who has stayed in power and wants to stay in power until God calls him. You can't unite Africa.
I'm losing
Pierre Lumumba, tell me now, how are people going to unite with such a person who has elongated himself until boys come on the street like what is happening in Bashiru's country? Look at what, it's a shame to have leaders, to have people overturning government of property, setting fire on government taxpayers' money because you have stuck in power. We can't unite.
David, I want us to ask the question. You are losing. Why do I say I'm losing you? Because on the one hand,
I am on the right path.
On the one hand, you are saying that Africa should integrate. And on the other hand, some of the difficulties and the headwinds in your mind make it impossible for Africa to unite. Is it not the case? For example, if I asked you to write a position paper under the subject, what are the impediments that stand in the way of African integration? What would you list as those impediments?
1, bad governance.
I hear you.
2, human rights abuses. 3, corruption. The degree of corruption, poverty. The degree, the gap between the poor and the rich is so big, thereby bringing corruption. Economic inequality. There's inequality in terms of how do you unite people who are hungry? How? That one is an impediment. 3, ethnicity. We have a problem of ethnicity in this Africa. You go to South Africa from Uganda, and a South African man in a bar where you are buying your beer and you are buying your wine, he tells you, welcome to Africa. Yes, Pierre, what has happened to you? You always preach this thing around Africa. You preach it yourself. And I'm now also preaching it to you today. A man tells you, welcome to Africa. Then you ask him, was I not from Africa? I came from Kampala. He said, no, Kampala is not Africa. South Africa is Africa. Can you see? That cheap ethnicity, tribalism, creating tribal enclaves, we have carried it to a national level. Each country has got, you know, we just see these countries, luckily enough, my own country, Uganda, is a criminal offense for you to call me like the way you call me in conferences. And you are used to, when you see me in the audience, you are saying, oh, Matsanga from Bali. They will arrest you in Uganda. Mm-hmm. It's a crime for you to point me as a Mugisu by Ugandan law. And I never do that. I'm now telling you, because in Uganda you might not come back, because it is criminal for you to call me by my tribe in my country. We have criminalized tribalism. If we go that way, we might become, at some stage, we might become the Tanzania. Come back to Kenya here. We are torn between tribal enclaves. When you touch one button, he said, haha, he has now come for all of us. That mentality is an obstacle. So combine all this, plus the question of small arms. Every country is armed. I gave you a point. You know, you're a professor, you write, you only mark what is there. I am at a lower age. I was only trying to take you very fast so that you can give me marks quick. And I told you,
okay, you've identified problems. You've identified four things that stand in the way of African integration. Now, the second question, what would you do in order to ensure that we eliminate these obstacles so that we move towards unity, so that we are not simply professional fault finders? We offer solutions. What solutions would you offer so that we eliminate these impediments and we move towards integration?
One of the solutions is to have as many think tanks, properly organized think tanks, with people like you and me, to go around Africa to talk. We need people to volunteer. We need presidents to volunteer, to highlight, to pinpoint out serious Africans. There are many, not us only.
Oh, there are many.
There are many,
better than us.
Better than us. Let's form a big continental think tank or several think tanks in each country. I'm very happy that yesterday a conference in Kampala. That's the type of Africa we want. I don't know why they did not invite you to cheer them up, because some of them would have run through the windows. You know, instead of coming through the door, they would have run through the ventilation, because they would have not listened to your warning. Yeah. So the conference in Kampala, a starting point of small think tanks, that each country must have a think tank of a Pan-African value that is put on an African value, Pan-African system, things like a Pan-African forum in the United Kingdom. I collect several academics. As I speak now, there are several academics working with me in the United Kingdom as Pan-African, from Ghana, from Nigeria, from South Africa, from Malawi. I have them. I call like this a conference, the hall will be full. And we talk.
We can spend our lives holding workshops and seminars.
It's not a workshop. Mine is not a workshop. Mine is not a workshop. In fact, workshops are more in Kenya. Have you ever seen the Chinese holding workshops? Have you seen a Chinese holding a workshop? My method is Chinese. I use no workshop. If I have the money to hold a meeting in London Hotel, Parkland, I call them. And it's not a workshop. I said, this is what we want to do. There is no more selling of oil anywhere in Somalia. These are some of the things that we should take up.
Now, if you move on this trajectory, having identified the impediments, having identified the solutions, recognizing that we have these regional bodies, in your own view,
if we were to move, even in the face of the environment that we are in today, do you see Africa integrating in the next 50 years?
Yes, 50 years when we are gone, you and I.
Which is okay.
Which, if God, I don't think God will keep us that 50 years, but we don't know. Very many people wished Mugabe death, but he's still alive, and they have gone and left him.
Do you think that 50 years is a
good time? Yes, it's a
even
good,
more?
It is. It is 50 years.
So what message are you sending to your audience? You are telling them that the African...
There is hope.
That the project of African integration is a project that is worth pursuing.
Yes.
That wherever they are, they should not be discouraged by the difficulties that they are confronting, but that they should remember that there are people out there who would desire that Africa remains in a state of disunity because it is for their benefit, and that it is time for Africans to wake up.
Exactly.
And recognize that Africa's long-term health and well-being not only requires but demands that Africans are united, and that we should now begin to concretize our actions and bring them down from high-flying rhetoric to some kind of practice.
I agree with you totally, Prof. The problem that we might have is that Africans don't recognize their fellow Africans. So it is going to be very difficult for us or for anybody. It's long, hard work to reach an agreement. Can I tell you why?
Tell me why.
The richest person in Zimbabwe is Strife Masiwa. He's the owner of Liquid. He's the owner of Econet. It makes a lot of money. But all what Masiwa does is to give lectures. Wait.
Yes.
That's it. Where is Zimbabwe? If Masiwa called Dagote, Dagote called Mohammed, Ibrahim, and called another rich person, called another one, and said, we are Africans, we want to help one country, his own country. This country will not have any problem today. But all you see is Strife Masiwa on Facebook telling people how people can... You see, we've lost the vision ourselves.
But David,
and that is... let me finish my point. You are killing it because there are so many people interested in this.
I want you to finish because I want to correct you.
Yes, okay.
I know that Strife has recently, through his foundation, donated $100 million.
That's not enough.
To help in a particular way.
Listen.
I know that Aliko Dangote has a foundation. I know that Mo Ibrahim. So there is a sense in which, in my view,
okay, this foundation is help who? No, you are saying more than you. Oh no. You have now touched me in a wrong way.
No.
Dangote.
Hear me out.
No, I cannot hear it out, Prof.
You're out of order now.
Okay, fine.
Listen to me.
Yes.
My own view is that the individuals that we are mentioning are playing their part. Remember that these are business people, and they are in the business for the purpose of making money for themselves. If they take a little of that money to contribute to particular social projects, they ought to be celebrated to the extent that they have done that. What we ought to concern ourselves is not to contract our problems out to these individuals. The question we should ask ourselves, what role are we playing according to our capacity?
Okay.
Yes, this is the question. Not
the role we are playing according to our capacity is what we are doing right now.
Correct.
We are now appealing to African leaders.
Yes.
And the people who can take up, like in Kenya, we want to appeal to President Uhuru Kenyatta to form that Pan-African think tank where Pan-African views, because he's a Pan-African himself already. He needed to solve problems in East Africa. You saw him flying in Rwanda. You saw him flying in Kampala. coming back, a shuttle diplomacy to make sure that peace comes. President Uhuru Kenyatta can start that engine, and the forefathers will not be regretful when they hear that it has been started in Kenya and it has grown wings. For example, we need to start an organization that can go to Europe, wear suits like you are wearing, meet the European Union, and ask them, why do you put sanctions on Zimbabwe instead of us removing sanctions and giving conditions on how food can be, democracy can go the way you want? Why do you do that? It is the sanctions are hurting people. We could be the people, you and I could be envoys running around this continent, running around this globe to find solutions for some countries in Africa. But there is nobody willing to help you, to help me. This is why we need to make an appeal that we should not be wasted in our own countries.
But I find that contradictory. The whole idea of, the way I understand it, the whole idea of integration is that we will create one Africa, and that Africa will be economically sufficient. Because one of the things that I would have loved you to hear, that in the spirit of the desired integration, we would have wanted to see an emergency meeting of SADC to discuss how to bail out Zimbabwe, or an emergency meeting of the African Union to decide how to bail out Zimbabwe or any other African in distress. But to say that we go to Europe and to America.
I was giving examples.
Yes.
That, for example,
yes,
the sanctions on Zimbabwe, the human rights abuses in Amazonia. By the way, before we go, we have to touch something in Amazonia. The human rights abuses in Amazonia, there would be eminent African people. Since Mr. Kofi Annan died, we haven't seen anybody replacing Kofi Annan to come up to say, hello, there is a war somewhere in Amazonia. There is a war in Cameroon where millions of people are being killed on a daily basis. Can we have an awareness conference in Nairobi, where people will come and sit and discuss and make resolutions known to the international community? That is the type of thing I'm looking for. That's the type of think tank. A think tank, because to get integration, Professor, you need that think tank. You need to travel with a think tank. You need to arrive and you are told you are the East African, Pan-African think tank, speaking on behalf of the United States of East Africa. You need to arrive in Lagos. You respected, you are speaking on behalf of ECOWAS. Then those think tanks can come together, sit down, and say, where is the problem today? The problem is Libya. Can we go and sort it out, talk about it? We shall have a conference. Where's the problem today? Zimbabwe. What is paining Zimbabwe? Sanctions from the United States of America. How many friends do we have in the US? Let's go and lobby the Congress. Let's go and put our facts on Trump's table and say A, B, C, D, this can be done, this can be helped, you can do this, put a condition, but don't put sanctions.
So I hear you to be saying, moving forward, as we talk about integration, what we ought, number one, to do is to recognize that there are existing institutions and existing initiatives. Is it right, therefore, to say that some of the things that we find in the African Union Agenda 2063, whether we think AU is effective or not, it is true to say that some of the things that they have identified as are critical on our path to achieving integration. Number one is that we should silence the guns.
Yes.
By the year 2020, which I don't think is going to happen.
Already, some guns in this region
are beginning to blaze. Number two, that we should ensure that we have free movement of goods. Number three, that we should begin to eliminate tariff and non-tariff barriers.
Yes.
Number four, that
these are free.
We should have the African skies liberated.
Yes.
And once we do those things, we will be slowly moving towards integration, and that it is also incumbent upon nationals of different African countries to begin to ensure that pressure is brought to bear within their own countries so that people are sensitized and they begin to make demands. So that in a practical sense, the people ought to be involved in East Africa to ensure that we have a single currency, that we have a single passport, and the same thing should happen in ECOWAS, the same thing should happen in SADC, the same thing should happen in Central Africa, and the same thing in the Maghreb, and that moving in this way, we will be moving towards integration, and that we must remember that is not going to be a journey for the faint-hearted, that we are going to make 4 steps forward and sometimes making 3 backwards. And we must also remember that there is no shortage of individuals and institutions and countries which are prepared to torpedo the project of African integration.
It is true, Prof.
Your last words in this regard,
as
we
speak,
begin to move towards our conclusion.
Prof.
And invite the audience to join us, because they must at a certain stage, mustn't they?
Yes.
Yes.
Prof, you have said rightly, I've pointed out the obstacles. The journey starts with 1 foot forward, not 1 foot backwards. We are on the journey. We are on the route towards that goal to achieve an African integration. I agree with you. But at the moment, the obstacles, we must lay down the rules. One of the rules that can make a better integration is we must lay down remove the 4 obstacles that you saw. Bad governance, human rights abuses in countries in Africa, poverty, economic decline, corruption, and other ethnicity, tribal enclaves, tribal wars, the fight for territories. As we are trying to integrate, some countries are saying, no, we want ours first. We are not part of you. You are wearing a suit which is different from British suit. So no, I think you must be Chinese. So this is happening today as we walk towards integration. I do agree, Prof, that integration in Africa will take place. Maybe 50 years to come.
Or even more.
Even more, because the countries that are telling us to observe human rights and the rule of law are the countries that are 1,600 years. Britain is 1,600 years since it started democracy, a Westminster type of democracy that we have in Kenya, the Commonwealth rules, the ones that we have. So until we come to evolve.
You know, David, I'm in a forum where somebody said that part of the problem of African integration is those of us who have had Western education. Whether that education is obtained in the United Kingdom, in France, or in Portugal, and in Belgium, that in our unguarded moments, in our actions, choreographed or not, we are tuned to think like the erstwhile colonizer, and that sometimes we say with our mouths what we do not believe in our hearts. Is that individual right in saying that some of us who have gone to school are the greatest danger to African integration?
I think it is true. It is. And I don't want to say no. It is true.
Yes.
Most of us copy some of the things that happen in Britain, and we want to bring them to Africa or from America. You have gone to study. If you read the book, The Lion and the Jewel by Wole Soyinka, Lakunule went to abroad and came back to tell African. You see, why don't you professors just tell the world that we behave like Lakunule? We behave like Lakunule in The Lion and the Jewel.
Is Ngugi wa Thiong'o therefore right when he says that part of the thing that we must do is to decolonize our minds?
Exactly.
And that once we have decolonized our minds...
You can only make Africa work when you ask yourself a question. Do we need elections in Africa? And I think I have found the right man today to answer. If I were the one interviewing you,
yes.
But I want to throw to the audience. Do we need elections, Professor, in Africa? Because you're a professor of all this. You look at what the problem of Africa is. Every 5 years, drums of war begin. Even in the first year. We are going 2021. Look at the drums happening. The drums happening across in my own country. It's 2021, but the drums of war are already out. The signals are out. And you can see we are going in an election. We have borrowed the China money. We have not even repaid it. We have started sharpening knives to hammer each other. I'm telling you, the China people who gave us the money have no elections.
No, but
why don't we think? Because you made some statement here.
What is an election? An election is a system which is recognized by a people in a particular political environment of selecting those who will lead them.
Yes.
The question that I hear you to be asking, this thing that we call democracy, which is defined for us,
which has colonized our mind.
Because the thing that when we talk about democracy, particularly those of us who have had the advantage of going to school, what has happened is that when we talk about democracy, it is as defined to us by London, Paris, Brussels, Madrid, and Washington. The question is, can we as Africans develop systems of participation which are unique to ourselves? Do they exist? And which will reduce conflict? This is the question that I hear you to be asking.
Yes.
And the problem is that we who have had the advantage of having been exposed, whether our political scientists, when you hear that we have political scientists who are in Africa, the political science that they go through is very Eurocentric in orientation.
Yes, it is.
And that being the case, when they are analyzing politics, they analyze it from the prism of their education, which is Western in character and in essence.
Yes.
And that also is a handicap in this part of the world when we analyze these things.
How can it not be a handicap in this world?
Tell us.
It has to be. Because look at this. You find an elderly woman climbing a bus. You push her down, you climb. That's the Africa we have. Maybe why people who have studied politics in Western capitals come to use the methods. For example, in Britain, you don't just run underground in a bus because you have seen it on the bus stage. You must allow those who were there before, even if you are number 60, if it is full, you'll wait for another one. You can't jump and go through the window. The driver will not drive. That's why most of the people who have studied political science and other theories come and say, for example, in Africa, for example, in Britain, for example, in New York, this is what happens. Here, Prof, we have a catalog, a cocktail of obstacles. The cocktail, like, we have no social order.
Do you think, David, that Western education, its other merits notwithstanding, has confused us, particularly those of us who have gone to school in these parts of the world, in France or other, that we are confused. And because we are confused, when we try to enlighten the population, we end up confusing them. And the net effect is that we then are not a solution to the problems, but we complicate the problem because of our exposure. Do you think so? And that even when we talk about African unity, our articulation of it is not grounded upon African reality?
I think you have hit the point. We have that problem.
What do we do now that we know that we have a problem?
We have that problem.
Yes. What do we do?
We have to begin.
When Googie says we decolonize our minds, how do we break it down? What do you and me do, for example, knowing we do that we have
to create think tanks and the discussion of this.
Okay, I hear you.
And then we want to support, we want to call upon the rich Africans to support such think tanks. That's why I said yesterday I was very pleased with what happened in Kampala. President Museveni called this All Africa Show.
I hear. I would have loved to see 1 or 2 comments from those who are watching us. It would have been very
she's
good.
coming.
Yeah.
She's powdering. She's powdering herself.
Yeah. So that we are able to.
Have you powdered enough? Because I saw her powdering. Prof.
Yes.
That is what it is, and many of.
You want to help us in getting some of the comments that are coming out?
For you, you can, Prof,
just help us.
You can look at this. These are the comments.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's look at them and let's sample some of them.
Several. You introduce.
Yes.
Her. You introduce her.
Yes, please. You just read some of the questions. Introduce yourself. I want them to hear your voice as you introduce yourself.
All right. Thank you so much, our viewers, for joining us at this evening, wherever you're watching us from. It is the PLO Africa Perspective. I am Miriam Mugutu, and thank you so much for engaging with us today in this show. And I see your comments have been coming in very fast and furious, and I see that a lot of you have a lot of concerns that you would want Professor Lumumba and Dr. Matsanga to really give attention to. And Marcel Samora, you're saying, and where are discussing this from? I don't know. He's probably comes from some part of Africa where they speak probably French. If you're discussing it from a land outside Africa, Matsanga, then I'm sorry, you two people are too decolonialized in your mind. I don't understand what he's saying. But yeah, those are his sentiments. And Benventure Asongoche, thank you so much for writing to us. And you're saying a democracy with hypocrisy, no country with more than 2 terms of office should be considered democratic. How can people stay in power for so long and yet claim to be democratic? And Obedi Obueno, you're saying, Professor, you're now doing the same thing you talked about a few minutes ago. What's the reason for scientifically analyzing election, which is simply the act of choosing? And Mboyo, you're saying, Professor PLO Lumumba is well armed and intoxicated with knowledge and language, and Dr. Masanga needs to do more work. All right.
Who is that?
Yes.
All right. And stand Iyara Silva Oge, you're saying there should be no more election in Africa, but to appoint a leader in our countries. I don't know your thoughts about that, Professor Pielo. And Ndundi Ume, you're saying Africa countries need strong institutions that are independent and will hold leaders to accountable. So we see.
I think that we have got quite a flavor of what the things that are being said.
Saying, yes.
And in my view, the debate of this nature proceeds on the basis that those who are out there should also contribute to it, because nobody has a monopoly of knowledge or wisdom. And we are speaking in the context of what exists. And let us not forget that what we are talking about is whether African integration is possible. We are already agreed that is something that is desirable. We should work towards it. And I think we have come to the conclusion that is something that we are moving towards, that we have even identified some of the difficulties. The question is, going forward, what is it that we should do to ensure that we achieve this? And once again, the most important thing is, and I heard you to be saying, that having recognized some of the problems that we have, one of the ways in which we should think about it is create think tanks. Think tanks drawn from Africans.
Yes, then
know what...
Before you go, when Obuyi says...
Yes.
There is nothing that I brought. I am the one who suggested think tanks, which you didn't suggest.
No,
but that is not a problem.
You know, one of the things that we should get used to
is criticism.
And
this is a good criticism that he's a professor, I'm a doctor, I have to study so fast to pick a professorship.
You know, one of the things that I love about a forum such as this is that there are individuals who have ideas, but one of the things, if they highlight some of the weaknesses that they find in our argument, that, in my view, is a very good thing. In addition to identifying the shortfalls in our presentation, I would myself love to hear the suggestions that you think should be taken on board going forward, so that the criticism or the critique is also made richer by recommendations.
I think we have You are right. And I learn from mistakes.
Yes.
And that's why I've sharpened, and that's why I'm able to quote all those things of yours that you always say in these platforms.
Yes.
Like a man called Olala, I think you have seen Olala from Uganda.
Yes.
Yes, Sebit Olala say greetings to PLO and David. David, how far have you gone with the issue of corn? You see, it's coming. That's Olala's cousin or something.
Yes.
I think we finished it a long time ago.
And I think Professor Pielo just mentioned something about solutions. And I think one of our viewers here, as much as criticism, I think one of them might have a solution he thinks might work. And he's saying, his name is Kang Guot. Thank you so much for writing to us. And he's saying, if the 5 regions of Africa, geography region, will be united to work together and then continue on the pace, will be better. So he's thinking all these regions.
So that I think is something that is visible on the ground, that we recognize the 5 regions, and then in a gradual way we move towards integration. And one of the most important things that we must not forget is that there is now what is described as the 6th region. Africans in the diaspora, and there are millions of them out there, are now saying, what is it that we can do in order to contribute to the mothership, which is Africa?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I think what we can do right now is to appeal to Africans, is to appeal to those people who can help to create these think tanks, to appeal to presidents. I think that is one of your serious suggestions, that you said, at least when we have a forum like this, let President Uhuru Kenyatta and the rest, Museveni, help to set up this think tank, bring back Pan-Africanism.
Must we wait for them to set up? Because as I speak to you now, I know
we are here.
African
we are already in a Pan-African
which have this.
We are already here, but we need a push. For example, there are so many people in Africa who would like to hear your voice.
But beyond that, David, what I'm saying is that there are many individuals across Africa and outside of Africa who are already organized into groups.
Exactly.
One of the things that I would want to hear is how we should bring these groups together so that we begin to have a conversation. One is not saying that they should dissolve or disband, but they can cross-fertilize, and through that act of cross-fertilization, we can come up with rules of engagement. And it's these rules of engagement that will be used to confront those who are for the time being in political leadership, so that we can positively also inform the African Union agenda. African Union may have all its problems as we know them, but it cannot be wished away. It cannot be wished away because it exists, because to the extent that it exists, it is functioning. Whether its function is functioning at full throttle, that is another debate, so that its agenda may be changed and reoriented in the direction that we think is desirable.
I agree with you, Prof. African Union could have initiated, but what we see in African Union is we are looking at institutions created for political expedience. There is nobody looking at what your view is. For example, you could be doing a better job in African Union if there was an umbrella in which you can be able to be called to travel to each part of Africa for particular days to address this Western Africa, Southern Africa, supported by the AU.
That is a suggestion.
That's a suggestion.
And there is no shortage of Africans who could be doing that.
Exactly.
There are good people in French-speaking West Africa. Yes. In fact, this idea, perhaps I was using this because it is part of the language that we use on a daily basis. If you are to ask yourself in these countries that we call French-speaking West Africa, how many people actually speak French, you discover is no more than 10% of the population. In the so-called English-speaking African countries, if you ask yourself how many people actually speak English, how many people actually speak Portuguese. So I think that one of the things, and I'm very happy that we are beginning to recognize that language is a critical factor in integration, and it gladdens my heart that Kiswahili is now beginning to gain acceptance. The South Africans are working on Kiswahili, and I have heard voices from South Africa saying Kiswahili should be adopted as the lingua franca. I believe that that is one of the ways in which we will begin to ensure that we speak in a language that is embraced across the continent. And this may take time, but is a good beginning as a part of the process of decolonizing our mind, which also means we decolonize our language, so that when I'm in a forum such as this, I'm able to say some of these things in the Kiswahili language, and if necessary, I say it in Hausa, and if necessary, I say it in Yoruba, whichever language is adopted. But I think Kiswahili has a head start in this regard already.
You would actually go back to say one of the things that Idi Amin left as a legacy is that Idi Amin, whenever he used to go to London, he says he's speaking Swahili or Uganda.
Yes.
So the Queen and others would struggle to find these microphones that can, and Amin starts speaking Swahili.
Yes.
The Queen has to put on.
Do we have another
and
intervention?
just to add on what you're saying,
Yeah.
Mbuyu is saying Julius Malema prefers English as an African language. I don't know.
You see? But why should Abuyi is saying exactly what I said much earlier. We cannot interpret when we still look at each other in different formats. Before we can, you have heard this song Niara Dudi. I don't know how she could say it. Niara Dudi. That song in the hymn, one of the hymns in the Christian Anglican church. That song is sung mostly when people are being said bye-bye.
Okay.
Yes.
But let's hear further intervention.
There are several.
Yes. And David Amor Majero, you're saying you must transform Africa before uniting it.
You must what?
Transform Africa before uniting it.
But transformation is a constant process. So transformation is not an event. I think the society transforms, and part of the integration, in my view, is part of the transformation. So while I hear you, my own view is that you cannot say that we have now transformed Africa and therefore we integrated. Transformation is something that is continuous, is like change. It is the only thing that is constant. But I hear you as you talk about transformation. Yes.
Right. Hamid War has written in and is saying, Professor, if I ask one question, why don't you talk about North Sudan, as we have been suffering for years and years?
But we have said, I think David did mention about
Sudan.
South Sudan and what has been happening
North
in
Khartoum.
And there is no doubt in our mind that the administration there is an administration that has long lost its sell-by date, just as we have seen in Algeria with Bouteflika. Sometimes, in my view, it must take the African people to take some action so that change can come. And we have seen in the recent past when the people have gone to the streets and risen and made demands. We saw the Algerians making demands in the streets of Algiers. We saw them making demands in the streets of Paris. We saw during the Arab Spring, they were making demands in the streets of Cairo, in the streets of Tunis, in Tunisia, in the streets of Syria, in Damascus, in the streets of different African countries. The question is, if we want change, we must work at change. That is the history of the world, that change does not fall like manna from the sky.
Mazi Ike.
You have seen.
Yes, it says, sir, your theory about Africa unity will ever remain faulty. You cannot gather hyena. Tigers.
You can gather hyena.
Is that what he's trying to?
Yes.
You can gather hyena, tigers, lions, leopards, antelopes, and all those animals together and ships to form a colony. Can water mix up with petrol and run an engine?
Yeah, but those are way, of course, where even whether you agree or disagree with people, is that you must respect their view. He takes the view that African unity is a theory. And remember, at the very outset, I told you, David, that there are people who are out there who think this is an exercise in philosophy and theorization, and these are armchair analysts. That is to be expected, the doubting Thomases. But what I hear us to be telling them is, we are in a debate, and the essence of that debate is asking ourselves, now that we know that Africa is weak, is it possible that we should move towards integration so that we strengthen Africa? We are not out here, and I don't think it is our agenda here, to persuade people and to have an altar call.
Yes.
How many people have now been persuaded? We are putting an idea on the table for interrogation and scrutiny.
Whether it comes today or tomorrow
today is another debate, but
yes.
we are planting the seed. And we are not the first ones.
Yes, thank you.
Others before us, the Nkurumas, the Modibo Keitas, the Sekou Tourés, we are simply saying what they said before.
And there is the question of Amazonia, which...
Yes, somebody has asked some question.
Wasakwa Kam Kitale, you're saying African Union, East African Community, etc. is still a dream as long as you have leaders who have come to power through guns, still cherish guns to prolong their reign, manipulation of masses, throwing away the constitution, etc. So that is still a mirage in terms of uniting Africa. Some of these
those are some of the difficulties.
Yes. Yes, indeed. And Mbuyo saying the problem in Africa is dictatorship and corruption. African leaders won't want African unity because it will deny them power and corruption opportunities. The common people are ready for African unity, but leaders are reluctant. Integration of Africa is almost a pipe dream.
But the beauty of pipe dreams is that they remain dreams. And as long as people are dreaming and they wake up and look for it, there is a possibility. I'm quite certain that there were those in Europe after the Second World War who thought that you would never have a European Union, that you would never have a union where you'd have Germany and France and Italy using one currency. I'm quite certain that there were those who thought that East and West Germany would never unite. But yet, in our lifetime, we have seen that happening. So I personally hold the view that whether it is a pipe dream or not, the beauty is that it remains a dream, and we can make sure that it becomes a tunnel dream, if that is an English word and saying we can create.
Yes, it is a tunnel dream indeed, and I think you can...
But also, just before I leave the stage and have you come bring the show to an end, I think going through all these comments, what I see most of our viewers saying is that probably there should be like an outreach program and volunteering among Africa who have goodwill and who mean well for this continent, so that the message is spread wide and, for African integration to become a reality.
Thank you very much. We have had a debate, and that debate is a debate about the question of African unity. And David, of course, is asking the question. Part of the problems that we have in Africa now is conflict, and we cannot end this show without reminding ourselves that one of the promises that we have made to ourselves in Africa is to silence the guns. And the question that we want to talk about, how will we silence the guns in Amazonia, in the Cameroons? How will we deal with the problems that are to be found in Central Africa? David, as we draw to the conclusion of our presentation, say something about Amazonia in the context of resolving the conflict and in the context of African integration.
Thank you very much, Professor, for giving me this opportunity for briefly to state that I want to thank President Macron for his visit to Africa. And during this visit in the 3 countries, President Macron has seen, he's going back today, and his people have heard. You don't need to see the president. You need to see the other officials that are in hotels, that are spread everywhere in these hotels. Some of us have had interaction with them. We have put our papers presentation on the question of the war as quietly to lobby what can be done. I am very happy that President Macron, for the first time, listened to us and actually waved, told the French, told the President Paul Biya, to release political prisoners, so that there is a rule of law which can guide the political prisoners through the courts. So most of the people who are here, we want to thank the president for listening. And these messages have been sent to him as he leaves for Paris today or return home, wherever he's going on his next. He has had some feel of what Africa wants. And believe me or not, Amazonia is another hot potato. that you cannot leave any stage anywhere in the world without talking about it. Therefore, the solution is this. We go back to resolution 1608. This will deactivate it. You asked me for the solution. That's all. 1608.
Don't assume that everybody knows what the
resolution 1608 of 21st in February 1961 gives the people of Southwest and Cameroon the destiny of their own homeland. It was a United Nations General Assembly resolution that was supposed to be propped up, followed up by Nigeria, to put back to the General Assembly so that it comes into a draft resolution to the United Nations Security Council. But it has been blocked since 1961, when people were still young. We are now growing, going to 70s. That resolution has been sat on. It has reached a point that President Paul Biya, who is running his 7th term in office, 7th term. Remember, he goes 7 years, 7th term, which means he will have gone 49 years by the time he finishes in office. If you are blaming President Museveni across the border, then you better look further across the border in the tropics of equatorial region of forests of Paul Biya. 49 years, if he finishes this. So he has refused to understand the difficulties of the people of Amazonia. There are no schools, there's no medicine, there are no roads, there are no houses, women are being butchered. It's a Human Rights Watch and other international agencies have documented this. It's not just a propaganda that we are making. The number of refugees growing up in Nairobi, I think you have gone almost every good mall. Nowadays you see huge, nice, with kitenge on Sundays. Very many refugees from Cameroon are in Kenya. Huge number. Some of them fleeing the troubles that are in Amazonia. So it is very difficult for one to leave such a thing and leave it without talking about it. But we have done our presentation. We have talked to some of the people who bumped into us, and we told them the problem is that one. We don't have any problem. We thank the president for having come here and left some goodies.
So thank you very much. I think the point has been made that as we talk about African integration, one of the things that we should do is to address the current conflicts in Africa. And the most pernicious conflict in Africa today is that of Amazonia. And we hold the view that one can only talk about African integration when those conflicts are resolved. That is not to say that we don't have conflicts in places like the Central African Republic or in South Sudan or in Somalia, and that all these struggles by the peoples of Africa in different corners of Africa ought to be given attention so that they are resolved, so that they can have the freedom and the comfort to participate in the debate and the quest for African integration. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. This is a subject that cannot be exhausted. What we have tried to do is to put on the table the perennial question whether Africa can integrate. As to whether it should, we believe that that is a debate that is now settled. We all agree that our strength will only be realized when we speak with one voice. And when we talk about speaking with one voice, we are not talking about unanimity on every subject. We are simply saying that on the broad issues of how to deal with our lives and improve the quality of our lives, we ought to be speaking with one voice and reading from the same script. It can be done, it will be done, but you must play your part. This is our call to you. Have a good evening. David, your final word.
My final word is, I want to take the opportunity to thank you, sir, for having come on this show. This is your show, and I hope many people have learned a few things. I see someone asking, what is the resolution 1608? It is a resolution that was taken to the United Nations General Assembly by the people of English-speaking Cameroon, Anglophones called Amazonians. They wanted a state called Amazonia, and they wanted it. It was agreed after a referendum. So that is the resolution that is called 1608 in the General Assembly that should have been followed for them to have self-determination. And I see so many people still want us to continue with the program.
And it's important to note that during that period in the 1960, the geographical position that we today call Amazonia was an enclave that was governed by the United Kingdom, and there was an opportunity at that time for the people to decide whether they would be part of Nigeria or part of what we now call the French Cameroons, now referred to as La République. That was during the reign of President Amadou Ahidjo. Yes. And when Ahidjo died, you remember, even before he died, he introduced a unitary government, and when the Biya administration came, they destroyed all these, with the consequence that some of the promises made to the residents of Amazonia were taken away, and there has in the recent past been an attempt to ensure that the gains of that region are taken away, and this is why they are now saying we want self-determination. And this is why their leaders, some of their leaders, were abducted in Nigeria and taken to Yaoundé and are in prison. And it is important to know that the High Court sitting at Lagos in Nigeria has ruled that their abduction was illegal and that they should be released forthwith and that they should be compensated. And this is critical, and returned back to Nigeria, where they had sought refuge because of the danger that they are exposed to by the Biya regime and administration. Thank you very much.
Prof, somebody is saying you can't leave the platform. They are here.
What I say
without saying
yeah,
something about Biafra. I think you've seen it. Those who are watching, the producer should have highlighted it for us. The problem of Biafra, between Biafra and the Nigerian federal system. So
I think it is important.
We have talked about it in general, but the person says
yes,
he wants you just
give
them
hope. It is important to understand the history of Nigeria, and it is important to understand the pre-independence history, that on the eve of independence, Nigeria had been governed in a very unique way. There was the northern part of Nigeria and, of course, the southern part of Nigeria. And during those early periods, if you remember some of the arguments that were put forth by some of the leading Nigerian freedom fighters, you will remember Madu Bello, who was very reluctant that Nigeria should be independent as a united Nigeria, the Sultanate of Sokoto. You will remember Obafemi, or rather you'll remember Wolowo. Yes. You will remember Nnamdi Azikiwe, and you will remember that after the coup in 1966, and you remember what by General Agui Ironsi. And yes, you will also remember that at that time there was what was described as the pogrom against the Igbos. And after that, General Odumegu Ojukwu, Emeka Ojukwu, then declared that Biafra was an independent country, leading to the civil war. And that civil war was prosecuted. And one of the things, the attempts that had been made at that time, was that the Igbo people felt that they were not being given equal opportunities to participate in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And there was a meeting in Aburi, and this exchange between General Yakubu Gowon and Odumegu Ojukwu, when Gowon, or rather it is Ojukwu, said, "By Aburi we stand," and Gowon said, "By Aburi you will fall." Ultimately, we know what happened. The civil war was prosecuted. The Biafrans surrendered. Ojukwu himself did then seek asylum initially to Ivory Coast, and Nigeria has remained as a federal government. The argument,
the union is not working.
And the issue, without us saying whether there is a case for a state called Biafra, I don't want to get into that because we don't have the time. But the most important thing is that the right of self-determination, and this is the question that is on the table. There are those who take the view that you can have self-determination without leaving Nigeria. And there are those who take the view that self-determination must mean the creation of a state that is called Nigeria, or rather the state that is called Biafra and another one that is called Nigeria. My own view is that it is very easy to be prescriptive when we are sitting on an armchair such as this. My argument is that there are issues within Nigeria, as there are within a number of countries, which require to be dealt with. And my hope, therefore, is that going forward, the newly elected Buhari administration will engage the leadership in that part of Nigeria with a view to finding a lasting solution. That is the kind of thing that we saw in the Sudan, where meetings were held here in Nairobi, Kenya, and the agreement was that you needed to create a country called South Sudan and have another one called Khartoum. So these are not easy matters. It's very easy in a forum such as this, without the benefit of sufficient information and detail, to be prescriptive. But it is good sense that makes us say and identify that there are issues within the Nigerian nation that require resolution, as indeed they are in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as they are in Ambazonia. But I think one of the things that we ought to do is to have a conversation where we invite somebody with a proper understanding of the history of Nigeria. And once we get, yes indeed, once we get such individuals, then we will engage in a schooled debate about Biafra, so that we don't shortchange our audience by giving statements which are not schooled and are not founded on facts which cannot be controverted.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you very much, viewers.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, viewers. That is Professor P.L. Lumumba, who has actually put me on tentacle hooks since we started. Yes. So I have now taken over the chair, and I want to thank you very much for coming here, sir, and continue coming. And we want to thank our television station in Germany, in the satellite that has been, if you look on this side, is different than this side. That one, the satellite. You are all over the satellite system in the world, and you are being seen on a free-to-air. So thank you very much for coming, Professor, and thank you very much. I hope the audience has learned something, and the next time Professor will bring another person. I've been fried several times here. I want to sit that side and see you fry another person.
Thank you very much.
Anybody like Muruka, then you can have a showdown. It is your show. So thank you very much. Thank you, and be good as usual. Remain with us until tomorrow at 11 a.m. in the morning, when we return with African news. Thank you. Goodbye. This is Punchline Africa TV, all the way from Nairobi, the Republic of Kenya, and London and Berlin. Thank you.
Thank you, and good night.
Hey.
must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.